Okay, we will get started. So welcome everyone to the third Public Information Center for the Bowmanville East Urban Center Secondary Plan Update. Thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Emily Schaefer and I'm a planner with the municipality and the municipality's lead for the secondary plan project. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I would like to begin with a land acknowledgement. The municipality of Clarington is situated within the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas and Chippewas of the Anishinaabe, known today as the Williams Treaties First Nations. Our work on these lands acknowledges their resilience and their longstanding contributions to the area, now known as the municipality of Clarington. Next slide, please. Thank you. So now I'll begin with a brief introduction to the project team. Joining myself on this project from the municipality of Clarington, Lisa Backus, Manager of Community Planning and Economic Development, and Karen Richardson, Manager of Development Engineering. Our lead consultant team working with us on this project is SVN. Blair Scorgi and Lena Aldejani are joining us tonight. Blair, if you could introduce your team, please.
Certainly. Yes, on behalf of SVN, as Emily mentioned, Lena and myself are here tonight. In addition to the two of us, Shonda Wang is the principal in charge of this project on behalf of SVN and the project director on behalf of the consultant team. Lena is a senior associate at SVN and providing sort of senior level oversight on the project. I'm an associate at SVN and I am managing the project on behalf of the consultant team. And with us, in addition, Mike Hudson, who's a senior urban designer, and Lucy G, who's a planner with SVN. In addition to that, we are part of a broader consultant team that incorporates a number of different disciplines and a number of different areas of expertise, including representatives from the Canadian Urban Institute, AECOM, Common Bond Collective, and Footprint Consulting. Thank you.
Thanks, Blair. So the purpose of today's meeting is to reintroduce the Bowmanville East Urban Center Secondary Plan Update after a pause in 2020 and provide a project update where we're at, present work undertaken to date, and hear your feedback on what is envisioned for this area as the project moves forward. Next slide, please. So a brief outline of the presentation today. First, we will start with an introduction to the project. Present the updates to the vision and guiding principles, emerging character areas, the draft demonstration plan and vision for the Bowmanville Hospital, Goodyear Lands, and downtown precincts. And then next, we will share ideas for future active transportation, like bike lanes and public realm improvements. We will also provide some time at the end of the presentation for question and answer. And we'll wrap up the presentation with next steps. Okay, so throughout this presentation, we will have poll questions pop up on your screen for your feedback. You can also type in questions throughout the presentation by clicking the Q&A icon, which you can see on this slide here is shown at the bottom center of your screen. And once you click this icon, you will be able to type in questions. If you'd like to switch the view of your screen, click the icon at the top right-hand corner. And if you'd prefer to watch the presentation with the speaker and presentation side by side, you can click View Options and select this. And at any time, if you would like to leave this meeting, please click the red Leave Meeting button, which is located at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Okay, and so now I will provide some background and explain what a secondary plan is. The Bowmanville East Urban Center Secondary Plan was originally created in 1996 and has not been updated since 2003. The purpose of updating this plan is to bring it into conformity with Clarington's official plan, provincial and regional policies, to address current and anticipated market trends, as well as reflect the unique redevelopment potential of the former Goodyear lands. On this slide, you can see secondary plan is at the neighborhood level of the planning hierarchy. A secondary plan at a high level is a policy document to manage new growth in a specific area. Any new development must conform to the secondary plan as well as any applicable higher up planning policies. The type of elements a secondary plan includes are permitted uses, road infrastructure, development density, parks and open spaces, community facilities, transportation networks, servicing, and cultural and natural heritage. Next slide, please. So here's a map to provide a brief overview of where the Bowmanville East Urban Center secondary plan is located in Clarington. So the project area is highlighted on this map in red, with King Street shown running through the area in orange. Next slide, please. And to provide a bit more context, here's an aerial photo of the secondary plan area with key streets shown. The area includes historic downtown Bowmanville, the former Goodyear tire property south of Queen Street, Bowmanville Creek to the west, and Bowmanville Hospital and Bowmanville Mall to the east. Okay. So this concludes the introduction part of the presentation. Thank you for listening. We are going to pull up a couple poll questions now, and we are interested in your feedback and want to hear from you. However, it's not mandatory that you participate if you don't want to. Okay, so the first poll question is, where do you live and work? So you could select within the Bowmanville East secondary plan area, in Bowmanville, outside the secondary plan area, elsewhere in Clarington, in Durham region or other. So I'll give you a minute or so to answer this question. And the second question is, what best describes you as a participant today? Resident, developer or builder, business owner, municipal or regional government representative, public agency representative, or other. Okay, and the third question, scroll down. And lastly, have you attended a public information center for the secondary plan before? And the answer is yes, no, or not sure. So I'll give about 30 more seconds to answer these polls. Okay. Oop. So now we have our results of the first question, where do you live and work? Most respondents indicated they live and work within the secondary plan area with 50%. 25% of respondents said they live and work in Bowmanville, but outside of the secondary plan area. And then we have about 16% coming from in Durham region, but outside of Clarington, and then a number of others. Okay, for question 2, what best describes you as a participant today? Majority at 61% are residents, 14% developer or builder, 11% business owner, and then about 16% here other, 5% public agency representative, and 2% municipal or regional government. Okay, we're happy to see that most people here today are residents, so and building local folks, so that's great. And the third question, have you attended previous public meetings for the secondary plan before? Majority at 75% said no, and 23% have. Great, this is good information. Thank you everyone for your participation. We will move on. Okay, next slide, please. So in terms of where we're at in the overall in the project, I'll pass it over to Blair to provide project timeline, where we left off, and what we've heard from our last public information center. So Blair, take it away.
Okay, thanks very much, Emily. So we are in the midst of a 3-phase study process. Phase 1 initiated in 2018 and wrapped up in 2019, and that looked at comprehensive background review and analysis of existing conditions and relevant information and data, and incorporated its own set of consultation sessions with the steering committee and the public and other stakeholders. And we are in phase 2 of the study process now, and partway through phase 2 of the study process. And basically at this point, we're incorporating a best practice review, and we're preparing a draft vision statement, set of guiding principles, a demonstration plan with supporting statistics, precinct plans, and preliminary policy directions to inform what will become the Bowmanville East Urban Center secondary plan. The secondary plan itself will be developed in the third and final phase of the study, which is anticipated to be to initiate later on this year, later on this year in 2022, and to wrap up in 2023. And in that phase, we will see the development of the actual secondary plan document itself and supporting policy, regulatory, and other documents, including design guidelines. And there will be an additional opportunity for stakeholder and public feedback and input through a series of in-person and online, I believe, supplementary online consultation opportunities in that third and final phase in 2023. So I'll sort of pick up the presentation from here, and basically where I want to just sort of start off is to give you a sense of where we left off and where we're going. So as Emily mentioned, the project initiated in 2018. As I mentioned, the first phase was undertaken throughout the course of 2018, 2019. The project went on hold partway through 2020. At that point, phase 1 had been completed, and phase 2 of the study was partway through development. Sort of draft deliverables had been prepared, including a draft vision statement, guiding principles, demonstration plan, and precinct plans. The project reinitiated in February of this year, 2022. And basically, we have, over the last few months, been updating phase 2 materials and deliverables based on new inputs and information that have become available, as well as emerging issues and priorities that have emerged over the course of the last couple of years. Once those materials were compiled and updated, we met with our steering committee in April and presented the updated information, got their feedback, And this brings us to tonight. We're now here presenting this information to you. We want to get your feedback, your input, which we will use to help inform revisions to the phase 2 deliverables that will be reflected in a phase 2 technical report that will be prepared later on this summer and over the course of the early fall in all likelihood. So what do we mean when we're talking about new inputs and information? Well, specifically, we met with the municipality in February and we got their feedback on some specific criteria that we were using as the basis of our development demonstration plan, specifically soft site criteria and the associated mapping. We received updated floodplain data from the Central Lake Ontario Conservation Authority, otherwise known as CLOCA. We did some additional work to update the concept for the Goodyear lands. We reviewed and incorporated information based on new and revised development applications that have been submitted or revised over the course of the last couple of years. And finally, we received a set of population, residential unit and job projections from Durham Region that sort of forecast development in Durham Region to what we call a planning horizon or an end date of 2051. And we wanted to ensure that we incorporated that to the best of our ability in our preliminary sort of planning. So that informed some revisions to our demonstration plan as well. In terms of emerging issues and priorities, the biggest thing that I can think of really is drawing upon lessons that we've learned throughout the course of the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular with respect to the importance of ensuring that we do everything in our power to plan for King Street to remain a vibrant and resilient commercial main street, and for the Bowmanville East Urban Center secondary plan to remain and to become an increasingly complete and vibrant community, among other things. So, as I mentioned, we have had a series of meetings with stakeholders, the steering committee, and the public over the course of the last couple of years. To sort of bring us to the point that we are today. So over the course of those meetings that have occurred to date, we heard sort of 7 key takeaways, or we've organized the feedback into sort of 7 key takeaways, and these are what they are. So design a network of mixed-use walkable nodes accessible by bike and foot, consider and identify existing and future transit connections, protect, enhance, and connect to natural heritage systems, consider access to parks and open spaces, including opportunities to create new green spaces, consider heritage properties and adjacencies to designated properties, create policies related to phasing and the interim use of lands, and finally, consider sustainability policies to promote environmental and climate resilience. So these key takeaways or directions were used to inform the development of the vision statement, the guiding principles, and those in turn helped inform the development of the demonstration plan and some of the ideas around different character areas and precincts that we're going to present to you this evening. So here is the draft vision statement. This is effectively intended to serve as a summation of all key goals and objectives of the secondary plan study. It's a high-level, all-encompassing, and future-oriented statement, and it serves as the basis of our guiding principles, which I'll present in a minute. Very quickly, the Bowmanville East Urban Center will treasure the old and reshape it in ways for new generations to enjoy, and specifically, it will revive new civic, medical, and mixed-use precincts, facilitate new built form and densities to provide a variety of housing, business, and essential services, provide a vibrant, cohesive, and walkable public realm, and finally, be an entertainment, institutional, service, tourism, and family-based destination that is welcoming to all generations, incomes, and abilities to work, live, and play. Building off of that vision statement, we have created a series of 6 thematically organized guiding principles that sort of get into a bit more specificity. And so the first is providing housing choice and affordability. The second is improving connections. The third is diversifying open spaces. The fourth is maintaining historical character. Fifth is establishing an active street wall. And the sixth is promoting a sense of place. So these are intended to sort of build upon, augment the vision statement, and provide some thematic direction to help inform the development of the demonstration plan, precinct plans, and ultimately what will become the policies of the secondary plan itself. Okay, so based on all this information, and as sort of an outcome of the key findings of our phase 1 analysis, we have identified a series of emerging character areas in the secondary plan area. So the next 5 slides introduce these character areas one by one. These include the historic downtown, which you can see in brown here, the East Business District, which you can see in orange, the downtown corridor in dark yellow, and residential communities in light yellow, and the Goodyear lands, which you can see in red here. So the historic downtown is the first of these character areas that we're going to kind of look at in greater detail. So it's situated along either side of King Street, of course, in the historic core of Bowmanville. It extends upwards to Church Street to the north, between Squahog Street to the west and Division Street to the east. And it incorporates Bowmanville's traditional commercial main street. So for each of these slides, we've identified a high-level approach, a set of objectives and design parameters for consideration. These are not, and important to state, I think, right up front, these are not, set in stone. These are preliminary ideas. We're here to get your feedback on things. Nothing is finalized here. This is actually just the very first step of a series of steps that will lead us to the process of developing a series of policies. So really, we're here at this point to get your feedback on these initial directions, these initial ideas. And we want to receive that feedback, that input, and we want to incorporate that into our thinking, and that will help inform the process of developing the policy directions. So in terms of an approach, we're looking at the strategic redevelopment occurring along King Street while maintaining the Main Street character. So there's a huge inventory of historic and other buildings in this part of Bowmanville. We're not looking at making any dramatic changes to the built form. We're looking at sort of more of a surgical, introduction of infill development in strategic locations to augment and build upon what's already there. Retaining and reinforcing and building upon what's already there. So in terms of key objectives, we're looking at preserving the heritage character of the Main Street, maintaining and replacing affordable residential units at potentially greater densities, and or purpose-built facilities that are designed to accommodate specific functions, maintain small-scale local businesses, and introduce public realm improvements as well as connections to the Goodyear lands and Bowmanville Creek. In terms of design parameters, we're generally looking at building heights ranging from 3 to 6 stories, little sort of minimal setbacks from the street to acknowledge the sort of continuous street wall condition that exists along this portion of King Street, and the introduction of step backs above the established street wall, which is predominantly 2 to 3 stories in the historic part of Bowmanville here, just to sort of acknowledge that scale, that sort of level of sort of sense of pedestrian enclosure, that sort of level of human comfort, and step back development beyond that at greater heights in acknowledgement and in response to that, and also to mitigate impacts associated with shadows and privacy and overlook, etc. So then that brings us to the East Business District. And again, I should have mentioned previously, but there's a key map in the top right corner of your screen. So if you're ever having trouble in understanding exactly where we're looking at any given time, you can sort of refer to that key map. So this takes us to the length of King Street in the eastern portion of the secondary plan area, between Liberty Street to the west and Soper Creek to the east, and it includes properties both fronting on both sides of King Street, as well as those properties that sort of front onto the north side of Prince Street. It incorporates the hospital, the Bowmanville Mall, in addition to small and large format commercial uses, medical uses, and some residential uses. So the approach here is that redevelopment potential will basically be focused on medium to high density mixed use buildings and public realm improvements. So looking at really sort of capitalizing on the development opportunity that exists in this area, with single story, large format buildings and large surface parking areas, and concentrating a reasonable degree of development here where there is the opportunity. And there are fewer sensitivities to redevelopment, if you will, in this area. So the objectives are to meet density targets introduced by the province and by Durham Region, introduce pocket parks to balance development, and public realm improvements on King Street East and connections to both Soper Creek and the hospital site specifically. And in terms of design parameters, we're looking at a greater range of building heights, in this case, like approximately 3 to 12 stories, with slightly more generous setbacks from the street to allow for, more generous boulevard conditions along the length of King Street. And again, step backs above and a sort of, it's a established, but it's more of like an established and emerging street wall in this particular case. Then we've got the downtown corridor. So this area is situated along either side of King Street between Division Street and Liberty Street, as well as immediately north and south of the historic downtown, which is immediately to the west of it. And it includes properties that front onto the south side, or sorry, the north side of Queen Street to the south, as well as the Chartwell residence, retirement residence that's immediately south of that, as well as properties that front onto the north side of Church Street to the north. So it incorporates a combination of commercial and residential uses, and it serves as a transition, generally speaking, between the historic downtown and the East Business District, which I just described, and surrounding residential communities on the periphery. The approach here is to maintain key buildings. There's actually a lot of listed and designated heritage buildings in this area, but there's some sort of gaps between them and some opportunities to sort of fill in the street wall. So the opportunities to do that and to establish a transition between surrounding sort of character areas, as I described. Main objectives are, we're looking at sort of mid-rise built form as a transition, basically between the historic downtown and the East Business District, public realm improvements along King Street, connections to the Bowmanville and Soper Creeks, and to strengthen and reinforce, as I mentioned, sort of fill in some of the gaps in the street wall. And next, we've got the residential communities. So these are indicated in yellow on the map, so in sort of the key map in the top right corner of your screen. So these areas are generally situated in the northernmost portion of the secondary plan area and include those properties that front onto the south side of Wellington Street between Scugog Street and Division Street, as well as those immediately north of the East Business District and adjacent to Soper Creeks. So they incorporate generally low-rise residential housing stock. The approach here is sensitive infill development, maintaining sort of the character of the existing community and finding opportunities to augment through additions, renovations, and new infill development to accommodate a greater diversity and range of housing options while maintaining that residential character. So objectives: preserving the residential character, protecting mature trees where possible, and improving housing choice and supply. Design parameters: we're looking at no more than 4-story buildings in these areas, and a greater range of front yard setbacks to reflect the sort of prevailing conditions in these areas with landscape front yards, etc. So something sort of in the range of 1 to 3 meters in terms of minimum front yard setbacks. And last but certainly not least, we've got the Goodyear Lands precinct, or sorry, character area. Generally, the approach here is to create a complete community from the ground up with low to high density mixed use and residential developments and public realm benefits. The key objectives are to repurpose this former industrial land, providing uses that are complementary to those that exist on the commercial Main Street on King Street without directly competing with them. It's a new neighborhood developed at a higher density, incorporates an open space spine that connects Bowmanville Creek to the surrounding secondary plan area. Design parameters: we're looking at a broader range of sort of 3 to 12-story buildings in this area. Buildings sort of serving as a transition to existing adjacent sort of dwellings on the periphery. Landmark building height peaks in the center of the community. A range of front yard setbacks ranging, from 1 to 3 meters, depending on the specific context, and again, step backs above what will become an established street wall, but doesn't currently exist. So that brings us to our next poll question. Okay, so I hope everybody can see this on the screen. The next poll question. Do you agree with the primary objective of maintaining the Main Street character in the historic downtown character area? So options for responses are yes, no, or not sure. I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer that question. And the next question following that is, do you agree with the vision for accommodating mid to high density mixed use buildings and public realm improvements in the East Business District character area? So again, these are the lands sort of encompassing the Bowmanville Mall and the the surrounding commercial lands. And response is yes, no, or not sure. The third question, do you agree with the vision for a transitional mid-rise built form in the downtown corridor character area? So again, this is the area that's situated between the historic downtown and the East Business District. And again, potential responses, yes, no, not sure. And fourth, finally, but not least, do you agree with the approach for sensitive infill development and improvements in the residential communities character area? Yes, no, or not sure. So we'll give you another minute to complete that, and then we will report back on the poll results. Okay, I think it looks as though maybe a couple people are still sort of answering a couple questions. We'll give them another few seconds here to wrap things up. Okay, so we'll end the poll now, and I will share the results with you here. Okay, so I hope everyone can see this. So response to question number 1, do you agree with the primary objective of maintaining the Main Street character of the historic downtown character area? Okay, interesting. So 43 out of 47 of you, 91% agreed yes. No objections. A couple of people uncertain, and that's totally fine. Appreciate that. Second question, do you agree with the vision for accommodating mid to high density mixed use buildings and public realm improvements in the East Business District character area? Again, vast majority say yes, 72% say yes, 9% say no, and 19% not sure. Appreciate that. Question number 3, do you agree with the vision for a transitional mid-rise built form in the downtown corridor character area? Interesting, a bit more diversity here. 53% of you say yes, 17% of you say no, and 30% uncertain. Next question. Do you agree with the approach for sensitive infill development and improvements in the residential communities character area? Again, an interesting mix of results here. 51% say yes, 21% say no, 28% say not sure. So this is really interesting. And what I would suggest, and I should have mentioned this earlier, and I apologize, but due to sort of the limitations of undertaking a virtual public meeting, we are limited in what we can accommodate in terms of providing for more open-ended discussion and open-ended feedback. But what I will ask and what I would recommend is for those who are interested, we will have a public survey available online in the near future. All of you who have registered will be notified by the municipality of Clarington when that survey is up and running and available. And that survey will incorporate opportunities for more open-ended responses and will allow you the opportunity to explain some of your reasoning as to why or why not in favor of certain things, and to provide open-ended responses and other general comments. So we encourage all of you to, when that notification comes your way, please fill out that survey, provide us with that supplementary feedback and input. It's really valuable for our purposes. So thank you very much for that. Really interested to see the results of the online survey and learn more about this feedback. Thank you. Okay, so with that, we'll take it to the next section. So the next section of the presentation focuses on the demonstration plan. So the demonstration plan was informed, as I mentioned earlier, by a series of decisions regarding identification of soft sites and stable sites, and a consideration for recent development approvals and active development applications. So effectively, basically, we've created 4 categories. We've created stable sites, short-term sites, which we anticipate developing between now and the year 2031. So the next, what's that? Less than a decade. The medium-term sites, which we anticipate developing between 2031 and 2041, and long-term sites, which we anticipate developing between 2041 and 2051, which is the planning horizon or the time frame that Durham Region has set out for its population, residential unit, and job projections. So we're trying to develop our plans or policies and our demonstration of development around the same time frames, so that those two coincide, so that we're providing an apples to apples comparison. So we need to be able to demonstrate in undertaking the study how we're able to achieve the region's projections, and we're working to illustrate that. So that's part of the process in determining this as well. So stable sites, basically, these are sites that are not highlighted in anything. These are sites with just a white underlay on them in the map that you can see right here. So these are sites that have existing multi-story buildings. They contain community facilities or institutional uses. They may be recently developed sites, or they are portions of sites that fall within the Cloca floodplain or within the top of bank setback area associated with them, or they may be designated or listed heritage properties. Short-term sites, and these are the ones that I sort of mentioned, we're anticipating developing between now and 2031, are highlighted in orange. And these include sites with development applications that have been approved or in the process of being reviewed and evaluated, sites with known redevelopment interest, etc. So this is sort of the low-hanging fruit. And I'll just note that while the Goodyear lands are illustrated as a sort of short-term development site in this map, it's a very large site. We anticipate development will commence in the short term, but in terms of the horizon by which, or the time frame by which the lands will fully develop, we don't anticipate that happening prior to 2031 necessarily. But we anticipate that process initiating between now and 2031, certainly. So the medium-term sites are those that you see in dark yellow here. So those are larger sites. They're also sites that do not require land assembly or consolidation. So they're large, readily developable sites. They may be vacant or they may be underutilized. They don't have a lot of, taller buildings on them. These are sort of sites that are easier to develop, that we anticipate may develop in between to 2041 effectively. And then last but not least, we've got the long-term sites, which again, these are the ones that we're anticipating developing to 2051, and they're identified in light yellow here. So these are smaller sites, sites that do require land assembly or consolidation, sites that contain existing buildings that are more complicated to, or not feasible or practical to demolish, or sites that may be contaminated. So this is sort of the logic that was used in determining site classifications based on anticipated time frame for development. So here we go. The next 5 slides provide a visual demonstration, and this is all that it is. It's just a visual demonstration of the potential build out of the secondary plan area to 2051. So each slide contains a timeline diagram in the top right-hand corner, a legend in the bottom left-hand corner, and key statistics in the bottom right-hand corner. And again, this is just a demonstration. These are not proposals. These are not, well, there are some proposals, and I will show you specifically which are proposals. But outside of these specific proposals, this is just a visual demonstration. It's not to say that this is what's going to be developed. It's just an indication of the types of development that could occur based on sort of the emerging direction of this study. So this slide illustrates the existing condition of the secondary plan as it exists today. And it incorporates, these are approximate numbers, but approximately 719 residential units, 1,256 residents or people, and 3,200 jobs. Now we have layered on the development applications proposals. So these are active development applications by existing landowners. They have submitted applications. They're in active conversations with municipal staff, municipalities in the process of reviewing and evaluating applications on these sites. So so we don't have any specific statistics associated with this. It's still in flux. These are concepts that have emerged that are being updated as time sort of goes on. But this is sort of the proposed sort of pipeline of development, if you will, in the secondary plan area as it exists today. And this slide provides a visual demonstration of the potential build out of the secondary plan to 2031. Again, to the major disclaimer here being that the Goodyear lands on the bottom side of your screen here may not fully be developed by 2031, but we anticipate them starting by that point. So this incorporates approximately 3,511 residential units, 6,149 residents or people, and 3,456 jobs through a combination of existing development, active development applications, and soft sites that are anticipated to develop between now and 2031. And this next slide shows the medium-term development to 2041. It incorporates approximately 5,149 residential units, 9,021 residents or people, and 3,699 jobs, again, through a combination of existing development, active development applications, and soft sites that are anticipated to develop between now and 2041, based on our criteria. And finally, the long-term projection to 2051 shows approximately 6,000 residential units, 10,515 residents or people, and 4,125 jobs. Accommodated through a combination of everything, including development that's anticipated to occur up until and including the 2051 planning horizon. So this, in other words, this represents sort of the long-term full build-out potential of the secondary plan area based on the criteria that were established to determine our soft sites and the phasing of development that would likely occur. It's not to say that it would specifically be phased in this fashion. That of course is not up to us to determine entirely, but is sort of trying to provide a demonstration and an indication as to how the secondary plan area could develop and at what intensity over what period of time. So with that brings us to our next poll question, or series of poll questions. But in this case, we actually just have one. So the question is, do you feel that the approach for growth in the Bowmanville East Urban Center is appropriate? Yes, no, not sure. I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer this one. It's just the one question in this round. Okay, it looks like everybody who's answered is going to answer has answered. I'll give maybe a few more seconds for people. Okay, we'll end our poll there. And I will share the results. Okay, so the question is, do you feel that the approach for growth in the Bowmanville East Urban Center is appropriate? And I appreciate this is a big question. Difficult to answer in a yes, no, not sure basis, but 55% say yes, 18% say no, and 27% not sure. And fully appreciate that. And again, encourage all participants this evening to complete the online survey when it's made available, and let us know, why you feel you do, you don't, or you're not sure that you support this. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, so this brings us to the next section of our presentation, which is going to focus on a series of precincts. So the next 3 slides that we have illustrate the vision, or this is sort of a draft vision, if you will. It's preliminary vision associated with the secondary plan's 3 precincts, which have emerged out of the findings of our phase 1 background analysis and previous consultation with the public and stakeholders. So this particular slide illustrates the emerging vision for the Bowmanville Hospital precinct. The precinct is, again, it's situated on either side of King Street, and on the blocks to the south between Church Street to the north and Prince Street to the south. It's also sort of situated between Liberty Street to the west and Simpson Street to the east. It incorporates the Bowmanville Hospital, medical uses, a combination of small and large format commercial uses on King Street, as well as some residential dwellings, as you can see. So the design vision for this particular precinct is to connect the hospital and nearby medical and supportive uses to create a new medical campus surrounding the inclusive events surrounding the Bowmanville Hospital site. The objectives here are to incorporate public realm improvements and connections to King Street. You can see there are some sort of mid-block connections illustrated here, pedestrian connections, etc. To introduce opportunities for mixed-use development on King Street, as well as a strong street wall on King Street, to maintain and enhance views to Soper Creek, and to expand upon job opportunities and to capitalize on the potential for a medical campus in this unique and important location in Bowmanville. This slide illustrates the emerging vision for the Goodyear Lands precinct. So again, the precinct is situated on the southernmost, south sort of western, I guess, most portion of the secondary plan area between King Street to the north, Bowmanville Creek and Dam sort of to the south and west, between Division Street to the west and Ontario Street, and further south to approximately Albert Street to the east. It's irregular in shape, as you can see. The precinct incorporates commercial properties that front onto the south side of King, incorporates the Chartwell Bowmanville Creek retirement residence, the former Goodyear industrial plant, and some residential dwellings. The design vision is to create a new mixed-use district with a combination of residential, commercial, and community uses and open spaces. The objective is to establish sort of diverse commercial uses that will complement and augment those that exist on and are prevalent along King Street, to increase the residential base to support local business, to diversify the housing stock, to incorporate a series of placemaking features, and to integrate existing cultural heritage features. There are some heritage properties and heritage buildings, I guess, within the Bowmanville, within the Goodyear lands, that we would like to integrate into this new community, and to provide connections to the surrounding natural heritage network along the length of Bowmanville Creek and the surrounding ravine system. Next, we have the downtown civic precinct. So this precinct is situated along either side of Temperance Street, between Wellington Street to the north, and Rotary Park and Bowmanville Creek to the south, effectively, as well as between Silver Street to the west and Division Street to the east. This precinct incorporates the museum, the archives, incorporates Waverly Place, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church, the municipal offices of Clarington, the public library and the Sena Path, as well as commercial properties that front onto either side of King Street and Temperance Street. So the design vision is to expand, entrench, and improve the presence of important civic institutions in Bowmanville, creating a symbolic and functional downtown civic precinct. And I would say that we're not even creating a civic precinct. I'd say that there's a strong civic precinct emerging here already, and we're looking for opportunities to capitalize upon that and build upon that to the best of our ability. So the objectives here are to, create a vibrant public realm, honor heritage properties and buildings, take an approach that's balanced and sensitive through the introduction of infill development. Again, as I sort of mentioned earlier in the presentation, and in this sort of broader historic character area, we're not looking at massive changes in terms of build form. We're looking at sort of sensitive integration of new development and additional density where it's appropriate. Placemaking in the traditional downtown, and expanding the public realm and open space network, and improving connectivity between civic features of downtown Bowmanville. Okay, so this brings us to our next poll question break. And in this particular case, we have 3 questions. The first is, do you feel that the vision and objectives identified for the Bowmanville Hospital Precinct are appropriate? Yes, no, or not sure. The second question is, do you feel that the vision and objectives identified for the Goodyearlands Precinct are appropriate? Yes, no, or not sure. And third, do you feel that the vision and objectives identified for the Downtown Civic Precinct are appropriate? Yes, no, or not sure. So we'll give you a couple of minutes to answer these 3 questions, and then we will share the results.
Hi, everyone. Just while we wait for the results, I did want to let everybody know that we are tracking the questions, and we'll be dedicating some time at the end of the session to address the questions that are being asked through the Q&A feature. Thank you for your patience and for your contributions and comments so far.
Thanks for that, Lena. Okay. I'm seeing activity slow on the poll here, so I'm thinking perhaps everybody who's responded, who's going to respond, has responded. So I'll end the poll there and share the results. Okay, question number 1. Do you feel that the vision and objectives identified for the Bowmanville Hospital Precinct are appropriate? Okay, 78% say yes, 4% say no, and 17% not sure. Okay, interesting. This is a bit more varied, so this is to me very interesting. Responses to question number 2: do you feel that the vision and objectives identified for the Goodyearlands are appropriate? 48% of you said yes, 28% of you said no, and 24% of you are not sure. So I'm very interested to learn more about this in terms of your sort of specific feedback and your thoughts on this. And third and finally, do you feel that the vision and objectives identified for the Downtown Civic Precinct are appropriate? 67% say yes, 4% say no, 28% not sure. Okay, well, this is very interesting. Thank you for that. Again, encourage everybody to fill out the online survey and let us give us all the information and feedback that you can to help us understand your thoughts and your thinking and your decisions for yes, no, or in some cases not being sure. Okay, so this takes us to a couple of topics that are currently sort of being discussed. I think if we can say amongst our team, and are things that I think we're really interested to get your feedback on in the online survey. We don't actually have poll questions set aside specifically for them tonight, for our purposes tonight, because we feel that it would be very difficult to get, I think, meaningful feedback from you in the form of multiple choice responses or yes, no responses. So this is something that you will see in the online survey. We'll be looking for your feedback on these couple of ideas that I'm about to present here. So, but I'll introduce them first to you here now, and you can let us know what you think in the online survey. So there are two topics that we're going to sort of explore as part of topics for discussion. And the first is future public realm and open space network. And the second is the future active transportation network. So with respect to the future public realm and open space network, this slide illustrates a combination of existing and potential future public realm and open space network opportunities that emerged out of the findings of our phase 1 background review and analysis. So, and this is conceptual. You can tell from the diagrammatic nature of this visualization that it is conceptual. But essentially, the thinking here is that we have, for each of the major character areas, we have identified what we feel are interesting opportunities and potentially good locations for public realm, open space interventions. And the idea really just sort of being that each character area would have a central public space. And that these public spaces would be sort of core structuring elements of these character areas and would form part of the broader public realm and open space network, and would serve as means of connection between different character areas. So you can see, conceptually speaking, again, several of these potential public space focal points, which you can sort of see in dark green on this legend here, are situated at major intersections or along major sort of paths of travel or corridors. So again, one in each of the 4 character areas. And you can also see King Street is sort of the primary active transportation and streetscape corridor that sort of unites everything, and especially sort of 3 of these 4 character areas. And then we have a series of secondary streetscape connections that connect the Goodyear lands to King Street and connect surrounding neighborhoods to King Street as well. And that these potential public realm focal points would sort of exist as focal features that are central to each of these 4 character areas. And again, these locations are conceptual, shapes are conceptual. Nothing here represents specific design direction, but this is just a high level framework, if you will. And so this is sort of the big idea. And from here, you know, we want to get your input at this stage on this sort of framework, if you will. And based on that feedback, we will reassess our framework and adjust our framework as appropriate. And from that point, sort of build out some of the planning and the design thinking around the public realm network in greater detail. So this is kind of where it stands. And again, the legend on the bottom left-hand corner identifies the existing natural heritage system, the existing open spaces, the 4 character areas in sort of that light green swath, the potential public space focal points in that dark green swath, primary active transportation and streetscape corridors, which is King Street, and that's, you know, the thick red directional arrow, and secondary streetscape connections, which are the pink directional arrows. Okay, so we look forward to receiving your feedback in the online survey regarding the future public realm and open space network. The second thing that we would really appreciate your feedback on in the online survey is a broader framework to inform the future active transportation network. So again, this is a compilation of information that came out of the phase 1 background review and analysis. It combines the existing active transportation network and planned active transportation connections and additions with potential future additions to that network. So again, this plan is conceptual. It's a high-level framework. We're looking for your feedback on the framework in its current state, and based on your feedback, we will adjust our approach, and from there start to get into a bit more detail about some of the specifics. But You can see here we've got existing trails are illustrated in a dashed light blue line. The planned trails are dashed orange lines. The exclusive bike lanes, you can sort of see a thick solid blue line adjacent Silver Creek in the east end of the secondary plan area. What we're calling urban shoulders, which are a thick dashed blue line, which you can see at the west end of the secondary plan area, extending northward from Scugog Street. Connections to existing cycling infrastructure, which are illustrated as dark blue circles. Connections to the existing trail network, which are illustrated as green directional arrows, which I appreciate are difficult to see actually in this visualization. And new sidewalks, which are illustrated in solid orange. So again, looking forward to receiving your feedback on the future active transportation network in the online survey. By way of next steps, we will be obviously launching the public survey. The public survey will be, the online survey will be available for a number of weeks following its launch. We will notify all participants in this public meeting of that survey when it does launch, and we look forward to receiving your supplementary feedback from the online survey. Once that survey closes, we will collect, synthesize, organize the feedback that we received, combine it with the feedback that we have received through the polling results, which are saved in the Zoom interface and our Zoom account, and we can refer to later, as well as the feedback that we will be receiving from you through the Q&A throughout the remainder of tonight's public meeting. And we will also consider feedback that we receive from our steering committee and other stakeholders, and we will be taking that information and we will be compiling it into a summation of consultation findings that will form part of our phase 2 study report that, again, is going to be prepared over the course of the summer and the fall of this year, and will be, if I understand correctly, Emily, please correct me if I'm mistaken, will be posted and made publicly available on the project website upon completion for your review and your comment in advance of phase 3 and the additional consultation that will take place in phase 3. And in that report, you will see how your feedback has been considered and incorporated into our phase 2 deliverables. So we will be looking at your feedback and your input and reviewing the vision statement, the principles, the demonstration plan, the giving some further thought to the character areas, giving some further thought to the emerging precincts, and giving some further thought to the topics of discussion that we just went over. And in addition to that, we'll be introducing some preliminary policy directions, high-level directions to sort of inform the development of the secondary plan itself, which again will occur in phase 3. But all that information will be compiled into a phase 2 technical report for public distribution and comment. So with that, thank you very much for your participation tonight. For more information, you can visit the project website. There's a link included here on the side. You can also reach out to the project team directly. Their emails you can see right here. And I think from here, we're going to go to the Q&A. Am I correct? Okay.
Yes, that's correct. Thanks, Blair.
Thank you.
Thanks both Blair and Emily for a great presentation today. We really appreciate you setting up the stage, providing some context for the study, and diving into some of the details of what's been in the works since the last public touch point. With that, I've been monitoring the Q&As coming in. So we would like to thank everybody for sharing their thoughts and feedback, some questions as we've proceeded through the process. I've tried to group some of the questions. Some of the themes are repeated. So I'll be posing questions to Blair and Emily so they could respond to them. Please note that we will not tolerate people trying to take, doubt others' opinions. As the poll showed, we did have 61% of participants identify as residents at the beginning of the presentation, and we need to honor and respect everybody's diverse opinions. So while some may not find some of the presentation presented today to be favorable in their opinion, we do appreciate their insight, but we also appreciate that others may find what's being proposed attractive for this part of Bowmanville. So let's all go into this with an open mind and dive into the questions. So I'll start with Emily. There are a few questions around public engagement, who's been notified, who hasn't been notified. If you could maybe give us some clarity around the municipality's process and who, notification areas and what kinds of notice were provided.
Of course. So our standard process is to put a notice in the newspaper, in local newspaper. So we've put that in 2 local newspapers, and we also circulate paper notices in the mail to properties within 120 meters of the secondary plan area and all properties within the secondary plan area. This is our standard process, and we also, I believe we also posted a social media post about this PIC, and I think that was it. We sent out in the newspaper and in mail out and social media.
Great, thank you, Emily. And I will mention that that's standard with the requirements of the official plan, the Planning Act, and just notification practices in general. If you do know people who maybe did not come across a notification for whatever reason, there are still opportunities to be part of the study and provide insight. So please do keep them informed, ask them to connect with the planners at the municipality and ask them to respond to the survey. We'd like to collect everybody's input. The second question again is for Emily, just to provide some clarification around the typical kind of development process. What kinds of studies are required? We have some questions around ensuring that traffic is appropriate and that the appropriate environmental studies are taking place. So could you elaborate on that, please?
Of course. So when we receive a development application, there's a number of technical studies that are required to be submitted. And so a traffic impact assessment is one of those studies, along with, like you mentioned, Lena, environmental impact assessment. So these studies and assessments are done by professionals and are reviewed by Clarington staff at time of a development application. So those 2 topics are reviewed from a technical lens and something that we look for when we receive a development application.
Excellent, thanks, Emily. And we have a few questions to Blair. There were some comments relating to this being an opportunity to integrate some innovative thinking regarding biodiversity, ecology, wildlife, the environment. Is that something that has been considered to date? Is that something that we could still contribute or add to the plans that are in progress? What are the types of ideas and approaches that you're considering so far?
Thanks for that. And in fact, Lena, you may be able to weigh in on this as our resident landscape architect at SVN. Absolutely, these are layers of information that have been considered to date. Members of our consultant team are focused specifically on elements related to the natural environment and biodiversity. There will be sort of direction. I think you will see in the phase 2 technical report very clearly policy directions that speak to these ideas and policies embedded in the secondary plan, in the draft secondary plan that speak to these ideas. In terms of specifics, I mean, there will be a broad range of different types of policy directions and recommendations pertaining to things, including but not limited to, environmental sustainability, resiliency, So resiliency speaking to the ability of an environment to adapt to and respond to sort of acute shocks and chronic stressors, some of which relate to the environment. There will be policy directions pertaining to natural ecology and biodiversity specifically. We'll be looking at things like low impact development opportunities, looking at innovative stormwater management retention ideas. I'm reluctant to get into specifics because we're not really at that point yet, but there are any number of potential opportunities that we could explore as part of this exercise in the process of developing draft policy directions. Some sort of more sort of design focused, some sort of engineering focused, looking at opportunities to, without again getting into too many specifics, with looking at augmenting hard infrastructure with naturalized soft infrastructure like bioswales, right? Rain gardens, these types of things. Looking at, you could potentially get into language around renaturalization or preserving the naturalized state of existing environments, promotion of pollinator species, these types of things. Again, Lena, I'm sure you could weigh in and provide a lot more than I'm capable of doing in terms of these specifics. But suffice to say, yes, these are things that are going to be considered and looked at in detail. And we have a dedicated consultant team of experts that specialize in these types of things that are going to be looking at them further as we move forward.
Thank you, Blair. And I would like to clarify that this is a secondary plan level study. And so the framework that is established will enable these types of initiatives, but it cannot necessarily mandate everything. And it would just provide some encouraging direction for applications to pursue, or some direction for public realm components. So things like streets and open spaces to integrate elements that would enhance biodiversity, stormwater management opportunities, just wildlife integration, et cetera.
Yeah.
So there are lots of opportunities to integrate that. The door is not shut on that in any way, and it is being considered as part of the framework. We hope that addresses some of the questions or concerns. Moving on to the next question, there was a suggestion that, there seems to be a preference to have some kind of public open space integrated into the Goodyear lands. There was a suggestion that it could be somewhat like the distillery district, where it's a lively hub of activity. Maybe a farmer's market could be integrated into it. Is that something is that an opportunity that could be integrated into the secondary plan study? And how does that fit into the vision of the precinct plan? Blair, would you like to take that on to start? And Emily, feel free to jump in at any point.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, yes, I think what we want to do is, create a vision for this community that acknowledges its industrial heritage, while creating something sort of new and cohesive and complete. So I think there certainly are opportunities to introduce sort of gestures to the site's industrial past and history, and to incorporate heritage elements of the site in the redevelopment. We have identified some opportunities to do that. We will continue to explore other opportunities beyond that. And with that comes, I think, the opportunity for unique placemaking opportunities, public art, programmatic opportunities, like things like a farmer's market, for example, could be something that could work very effectively here. We have sort of notionally identified a central defining sort of linear public realm feature, but it hasn't been designed per se. It's highly conceptual. It could be something, like a pedestrian muse, or it could be something that's combination of hardscaping and landscaping. It could be something that's more landscape. So I think these are all great ideas. And this is the kind of feedback that we're really interested in receiving, because I think, again, this will inform our thinking to some degree and what the emerging vision is for the Goodyear land specifically. But yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Blair. Emily, anything to add?
No, I think Blair did a great job of summarizing that. We want to add something here that that can serve as a park space, something interesting that can connect the area and create a space for residents to enjoy.
Perfect, thank you. Another question, and I'll open this up to either of you to take on. There was a question around any development that might be geared towards low-income housing, affordable housing. If that is a consideration, where is it being contemplated?
It's always a consideration. Absolutely. Yeah, and Emily, Lena, feel free to jump in here as well. But yes, I spoke earlier to opportunities to diversify housing choice and to cater to a broader range and diversity of housing needs. Part of that is by not all of it. Part of it is ensuring that we have an appropriate stock of financially obtainable housing and affordable housing and housing of different tenures, rental housing, owner occupied housing, etc. And so at the secondary plan level, there are certain tools that we can take advantage of to target and incentivize these types of things. And those are tools that we will be looking at in the process of developing the secondary plan policies for Bowmanville East. Again, I'm reluctant to get into specifics because we're not at the point of having developed our policy directions, but suffice to say, there are a number of different tools in the toolkit that we through the Planning Act have the capacity to look into and to integrate at the secondary plan level to ensure some accommodation for affordable housing. And those are tools that that we will be looking at in the process of undertaking the secondary plan update. Emily, do you have anything to add to that? Do you want to get into specifics?
No, I think that you summarized it well. Affordable housing is a priority for us. So you're right. We will be looking into this as we move forward with our policies for the secondary plan for sure. Thank you.
Thank you both. There were some comments around gentle intensification. Is there an anticipated increase of residents in existing residential neighborhoods through this type of intensification? Things like occasional duplexes, secondary suites, and is there a number assigned to that in the calculations that are being considered through the growth study in terms of a percentage of increase? Okay. I could help maybe clarify that to start. I think that
sure.
Some of that was part of the conversation that we'd had. There are allowances being made for it, but the increase is not considered to be substantial enough to really impact the numbers of the projections. So as a point of clarification, it is a natural process of the evolution of neighborhoods that we are anticipating will continue, but not substantially enough to account for that increase through a study of this magnitude. So hopefully that helps provide that kind of clarification.
Yes. In fact, in generating the what we call our yields, or the sort of preliminary estimates in terms of number of residential units, residents themselves, and jobs, we baked in a certain set of assumptions in developing those estimates, preliminary estimates, and those estimates did not consider and did not quantify development occurring within these low density residential neighborhoods specifically for that reason. I think the objective is not necessarily solely to intensify neighborhoods. It's more just to allow for greater diversity and range of uses, and to accommodate a broader range of housing needs in our neighborhoods, and that may result in population increase in the neighborhoods. It may also serve many other purposes. Beyond that, it may help promote housing affordability. It may eliminate barriers to entry in the housing market by offering different choices for people that don't currently exist. It may help to reestablish historic neighborhood populations, because some of our neighborhoods have actually, lost population relative to their sort of peak population, historically speaking, and help support neighborhood retail and other types of things that exist and types of things that we want to see, including the introduction of transit in Bowmanville. So, hope that answers your question.
And building on that, there's a question about any architectural criteria or guidelines for the strategic infills that are being contemplated, more specifically within the historic King Street area and the downtown corridor, the mid area between, the area west of Liberty and east of the downtown historic Main Street. Any considerations for architectural criteria there?
Yes, and I'll back up first and provide a little bit of context. The secondary plan is part of a broader family of tools that are going to be implemented. This is really just the start of a bigger process. So once the secondary plan is finalized, the zoning bylaw will be updated, and urban design guidelines are going to be introduced. There are other tools in the toolkit, so to speak. So certain things from a design perspective will be addressed at the secondary plan level. High level, the urban design based policies are something that could potentially be incorporated and are likely to be incorporated in the secondary plan. But given the scale of the secondary plan itself, these are sort of broader, higher level sort of design directions. The zoning bylaw will sort of zoom in a little bit and provide a little bit more specificity around different sort of building typologies, and it's reflected in terms of minimum maximum ranges, quantifiable metrics, different performance standards, etc. And then there are also the things that are not necessarily appropriate to incorporate in policy, but do reflect the design intent of the design vision. That they may be more qualitative, or they may be things that are sort of simply outside the scope of what can be included in a secondary plan or a zoning bylaw. So this is where urban design guidelines can be introduced and are something that we're intending to deliver as part of this exercise as one of the supporting documents to complement the secondary plan itself, that will deal with more specificity, that goes beyond what's in the secondary plan and the zoning bylaw, and will speak to specific design visions and directions in different character areas and precincts, including the historic core, including the neighborhoods, etc. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Blair. We did have a question of clarification around appropriate heights in the downtown corridor area that I can just clarify. It was in the presentation, and we provided a range of number of stories between 3 and 10 stories, depending on the context that's there. So as a reminder, and maybe this addresses some of the questions that are more specific to the Goodyear land site and their plans to develop, this public meeting is specifically relating to the secondary plan and the official plan level framework that would enable growth in this area. There will be additional engagement related to the development applications specific to each of those sites. So if there are specific questions, comments, reactions to the development proposals that are being proposed by the applicants, there will be additional opportunities for engagement through that process, and people can voice their comments through that venue. Before we wrap up, there were some questions of clarification that I'd just like to get to, if that's okay. There were a couple of terms used that I'd like to clarify so that everybody's feels comfortable with their level of knowledge. So there was the term active street wall. I believe it was used when we were talking about the downtown, historic downtown. What does that mean? If you could elaborate on that, Blair.
I believe the term was the established street wall, and that speaks to, I mean, really simply what we're talking about is if you're looking at, if you're looking at a streetscape and a number of buildings along the length of a streetscape, certain sort of patterns start to emerge, and you might see, okay, there's this particular block of a street typically has 2 to 3 story buildings. And so that when we sort of talk about sort of the established street wall heights, we're sort of talking about, okay, what is the typical range of building heights and how can we reinforce that? So we're not going to start introducing buildings with that go straight up to 6 stories immediately adjacent to buildings that are maybe 2 stories. We might be looking at buildings that go up to sort of 3 stories, and then the upper level step back from that. There's sort of a clear sort of break beyond that to provide some relief, to sort of help to acknowledge and to help reinforce the prevailing heights of buildings in the vicinity of that particular site. And then I guess the other thing that we're sort of looking at is along the length of the street wall, are we looking at like a continuous rhythm of buildings, building frontages and facades, or are there gaps between the buildings? We may be looking at sort of filling in. So when we talk about the street wall, we could also be sort of looking at it from that perspective with respect to, okay, where is there a sort of a consistent rhythm of buildings, like in the historic core, for example, or where do we start to see some gaps in what we call the street wall? So the spaces between buildings that you might see between the historic core and the East Business District, for example. And so the street wall is really just sort of speaking to how the street is framed by built form, by buildings on both sides of the street. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for the clarification, Blair. And I believe it was on slide 16 of the presentation where we showed some of the emerging character areas. There were some existing established residential areas shown in white that were not discussed through the review of the emerging character areas. What does that mean for those areas? What are the parameters for them? What does it mean that they are white and not part of the emerging character areas?
Emily, is this something that we should tag team as a response here? I'm just wondering, should we go back to the slide? Slide 16, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so we're looking at the residential communities that are not identified in yellow. Emily, please correct me if I'm mistaken here, but my understanding is that there's site and area specific policies in place that apply to these properties.
So are we talking about the homes on Galbraith Court?
No, we're talking about the areas, the stable residential areas, let's say
Okay, I see.
north of Church, just the properties east of Liberty through to close to Temperance, and then on the south side near the Goodyear lands, just at the southern end of the secondary plan area. Gotcha.
So these properties, from what I understand, are surrounding the secondary plan area and areas that we are taking a look at as part of this exercise, but let me see here. I don't believe they are included in the secondary plan area itself.
Yeah, so they're identified so that it's very clear for everybody, they're identified as stable residential areas, and we're not anticipating a lot of change in their character over time, or at least for the duration of this study and the development horizon. So hopefully that helps clarify what the intention is for those plans. There was a question around whether the decision to bring the GO train to Bowmanville was taken into consideration. I can maybe just quickly clarify that. It is through identification of what growth is appropriate for this study area. A number of factors are considered, including the expanding transit network. And so one of the priorities of the province is to locate increased densities closer to transit. And so connecting Bowmanville to a larger regional transit network definitely does contribute to the amount of growth that it is anticipated to absorb over the next few decades. The other, sorry, we've already answered that question. If you bear with me, there's a question about timeline. When might this secondary plan study be completed, or when is phase 3 going to be starting? So we can, yeah, great, thanks, Blair. Gonna take that on.
So we are chugging along here in phase 2. We anticipate initiating phase 3 of this process near the end of 2022, sort of the last quarter of 2022, and undertaking it over sort of final quarter of 2022 and the beginning of 2023. Specific date has not been determined, but preliminary sort of timeline, we're looking at Q2 2023 wrap up for phase 3 of the study process.
Great, thank you, Blair. And Emily, perhaps a question for you. There was a comment that the Bowmanville CIP area overlapped with this secondary plan area. Is there a plan to update the CIP as well, or is that already complete and is being considered as part of the study?
I think I will have to respond back to that person following the meeting. I can respond back if by email. That's okay.
Great, thank you. And then another just clarification of language being used. The term focal points was being used throughout the presentation. Blair, do you mind just elaborating on what we mean by that?
Of course, apologies, I'm full of jargon tonight. It's my fault. Focal point. Focal point. Okay, so a focal point is effectively if you can imagine something that sort of creates a central draw to a community. There's a sort of a sense of activity and animation. It's likely in sort of a central place. It's highly visible, highly accessible, and there's there's interest in that particular location. It's sort of the center point of an area of particular interest and activity, animation. So we might choose to, by creating a sort of focal feature at a major intersection with a public realm intervention, we may be looking at creating an attractive public realm feature. Could be, for sake of argument, lined with retail uses at street level, like cafes and things like that. So activity fronting onto that space. Maybe this is naturally a place where you might see public art features, wayfinding signage, interpretive elements, etc. High quality architectural interventions on the periphery, that kind of thing. So it's an area of interest in a central location. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Blair. There was a question, Emily, that perhaps you could help respond to. Are people able to look up the applications from developers for any specific projects online, or what's their way to access information about new development applications in the town?
So I think this is a good time to just reiterate that there are no development applications as part of this process. So this process is for the secondary plan. It looks at the area from a high level. But yes, if there are development applications, what we do, our standard process is to notify everyone within a certain radius of the development. And sorry, if there's changes for zoning, I'll correct myself. Residents within a certain radius are notified, but development applications, just generally speaking, So we do post a number of our applications on our website, so I can link that. I can link that in the chat for those interested.
That would be great, Emily.
Okay, I can do that.
Perfect. And similarly, I think there was a question around some of the assumptions or unit yields, some of the growth numbers that are needing to be absorbed. There's a question about where those are coming from. Is there a density factor? How's that all being planned out? So the phase 2 report will elaborate on this a little bit, but generally speaking, within the growth framework in Ontario, regional municipalities are required to provide some growth numbers that then local municipalities will allocate in a more localized context and more specific to secondary plan areas and urban nodes, which are designated for that growth. I hope that helps clarify. Perhaps what we could also do is share on the project website, just a link to the region study so that people can be directed to that as well.
Yes.
So I believe that's the bulk of the themes that we had received. There are still some questions about zoning or more specific applications that are coming through. I will reiterate what Emily just stated as well, that there are no development applications that are part of this secondary plan process. This process is driven by the municipality to establish a framework for growth. Development applications will still undergo their own process for rezoning, for site plan application or draft plan of subdivision, whatever the application includes, and that will include its own public engagement process. So there will be opportunities to stay connected and engaged.
And any questions that we didn't get to tonight, I can follow up with you by email. We do have everyone's email who has registered tonight. So if we didn't get to your question, I will follow up with you.
Here are the emails for your reference.
Thanks, Blair.
Thanks everybody for your time. It's around 8:10. I know everybody's time is precious and it's an evening and we're taking away your personal time. So we're very appreciative of your dedication to Bowmanville and its future. And we encourage you to keep providing comments and feedback through either by contacting Emily or Lisa or through the project website and survey. Certainly you'll find a summary of the results from this session also available online. And the presentation recording and slide deck will also be made available to everybody for their own personal review or for sharing with neighbors. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Take care.